बोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम्।
ॐ असतो मा सत्कमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय आविराविर्मयेति रुद्रयत्ते दक्षिणं मुखं तेन मां पाहि नित्यम्. May the divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Happy Mother's Day to one and all. This is the day all of us remember our mothers, and we remember the mother dwelling in the hearts of all of us as well. A mother is not so much related to gender as to the motherly qualities, and therefore, irrespective of our gender, there is a mother dwelling in the heart of all of us. The more we have the qualities to love, to nurture, to take care of oneself and to take care of those around us, to that extent, the mother within us becomes manifest. And so the Mother's Day, therefore, is a day of significance, of value, of meaning to every one of us, irrespective of our age, irrespective of our gender, irrespective of everything. And we know in Sri Ramakrishna's life, everything was mother to him. He saw when he closed his eyes, he saw mother dwelling in his heart. When he opened his eyes, he saw the presence of mother everywhere. In fact, sometimes the scripture itself is seen as a mother. Shankaracharya, in his commentaries, he does say it, because there are a lot of times we find a repetition in even in the Upanishads, and of course plenty we'll find in the Gita as well. Now, according to the rules of study, in Vedic study, repetition is considered a weakness. If you have said something once, why do you have to say it again? Repeating something leads open to the suspicion that you feel the first time you said it, it either wasn't said well or it wasn't effective, and therefore you feel the need to say again. So it's kind of a admission of some kind of weakness if you have to repeat something. In Sanskrit, they sometimes call it punarukti doshaha. Ukti means saying, punaha, saying it again, doshaha means defect, the defect of saying again. Now, we do find repetitions in the Upanishads and the Gita. Now, one way to say is, it's a weakness there. But that's not how these great commentators have seen it. Shankaracharya says that just like a loving mother who loves her children, who wants her children to be ideal in every way, who wants her children to improve, will keep on telling them things again and again and again and again. And sometimes we know, and all of us have been through that stage, sometimes when we have elders in the family repeatedly telling us something, and we say, "Oh, Mom, how often will you tell me that? You've told that to me many times." And sometimes, especially if you have teenage children, you might have heard reactions like that. And yet, parents will keep on repeating it. And they will do that because they love their children. Even if their children are annoyed, they will keep on telling them with the idea that something will sink in at some point. So Shankaracharya, in his commentary, one place, maybe more than one places. He says the Upanishad is like 1,000 mothers packed together. So if you are having trouble dealing with your one mother telling you something again and again and again, think about 1,000 mothers put together and repeatedly telling us, do this, do this, do this. So Shankaracharya says, that's not a weakness. It's just the love. The Upanishad, the Vedas, the Gita, these are our mothers. And they love us. And that is why Krishna will keep on saying in the Gita again and again, you are the Atman. In the Upanishad we see, you are the infinite one. The power of Maya. In one place, there's a very poetic passage in the Katha Upanishad, the commentary, and it begins like this: Aho ati gambhira durabagaya chamaya idam. It's a beautiful, beautiful passage. For those who follow Sanskrit, it's extremely poetic, it's extremely powerful. And what Shankaracharya is pointing out there, and then similar passages in his commentary on the Brahma Sutras as well. So what he's saying is, how powerful is this power of ignorance, the power of Maya? He says that no one has told us from the time we were born, no one has really, in these words, told us, you are this body, or you are this mind. No one really has told us that in that way. And yet, we have absolutely no doubt. We are completely convinced, this is me. These are my ideas, these are my thoughts. Without anybody telling me that to me directly, that's what I know. And yet, the Upanishads keep on telling us, you are not the body, you are not the mind, you are not the ego. And yet, it doesn't sink in. It kind of might make sense intellectually, but as we go about our day-to-day activities, we still behave and act as if we are this body and mind. And that is the power of Maya. That is the power of ignorance. That the scriptures keep telling us you are the Atman, and yet it doesn't sink in. No one tells us that you are this body and mind, and yet that has become our conviction. And that is why we need these scriptures. Sometimes it might seem very irritating. Sometimes we might get annoyed. Sometimes we might think, why so much repetition? The scriptures are tirelessly will keep on hammering that message within us. And the section that we are going to see today, from verses 13 till the end of the chapter, chapter 12, are exactly the kind of things a mother would tell her daughter or her son. What we have here is the set of verses where Krishna is saying, what are the qualities an ideal devotee must have? If I want to be a bhakta, if I want to be a spiritual seeker, what are the kind of qualities I must have? And if, Krishna is saying, if you have these qualities to the fullest measure, you are dear to me. And sometimes, as children, we might have seen, as we grow up a little bit, and when we are very young, we want to be loved by the elders in our family, by our father, by our mother, by those who are taking care of us. We get a sense of what they expect of us. We know that, oh, if I do this, my mom will be happy. If I do this, my dad will be happy, and so on. So that is exactly what Krishna is doing here in this section. He says, if you cultivate these qualities, I will be happy. In fact, that is a very helpful way to think, even with regard to our daily japa and meditation. Because sometimes we say, I have heard people say that, oh, today I'm not much in the mood. I'm just tired. I, I just don't feel like doing japa and meditation. Sometimes we do it as if we think about our spiritual practice as something that is going to make me happy, is something for myself. But we might as well include this thought in our thinking that if I sit for my prayer and meditation regularly, faithfully, with devotion, with sincerity, daily, that will make God happy. That will make my Ishta happy. Devotees of Ramakrishna can think, this is what will make Ramakrishna and Holy Mother happy. So it's not just about my happiness. It's not just about whether I feel like meditating or not. If I love God, if I love my Ishta, then I will do something even if I don't feel like doing it at that time, just out of love, because it will make them happy. And so therefore, these set of verses that we will read today, they all end up with this, Sa me priyaha, such a person is dear to me. Priya means dear. So what do I need to do in order to become dear to God? Let's look at it. Verse 13 and 14, we'll read together. Atveshta sarvabhutanam maitraf karuna evacha nirmamo nirahankaraha samadukha sukhakshami santushta satatam yogi yatatma dridhanishchayah mayyarpitamano buddhihi yo mat bhaktas same priyaha. The verse ends by saying, he who is thus devoted to me is dear to me. So what are the qualities that are mentioned here? He who hates no creatures. Adveshta. Dvesha in Sanskrit means hatred. Adveshta means when you have the prefix a added before that, it usually becomes a negative. So adveshta, one who has no hatred in the heart. Each and every one of the qualities that are mentioned here is an opportunity for us for reflection. We can pause after reading every one of these and say, what are the things I hate in life? What are the kind of people I hate in life? How much of hatred is in my heart? And then examine them and find whether that kind of hatred is good for me. People speak about being loving. Actually, we don't have to become loving at all, because love is a very natural quality within us. It's already there. We don't have, love is not some kind of a ethereal thing floating around and I need to somehow inject it within me. No. All of the love that is needed is already in my heart, because God dwells in my heart and God is love. God is mother and mother is love. So that love is already in my heart. And yet we might feel, I don't feel all that loving all the time. Why doesn't that love manifest in my life if it's already present within me? And the reason is hatred. Hatred is a kind of a door that closes, and therefore the love cannot come out. So the more I'm able to eliminate hatred, the love which is already within me will naturally manifest itself. And therefore, an important quality to be a devotee, an important quality to be a spiritual seeker, is to make conscious effort to eliminate all hatred. Adveshta Sarvabhutanam, all people. Maitraha, Maitri, friendship, to be friendly with all. Lot of times, although nowadays we use the word love all the time, many Vedanta texts, they, and actually even even Buddha's discourses and Buddha's words, the word Maitri, of friendship, is used oftentimes more profusely than the word love. And the reason is not difficult to understand. That the way the word love gets used in common conversations, it's almost indistinguishable from attachment. And attachment is a hurdle in spiritual life. And therefore, the words that the Buddha used often is friendship. Friendship in the sense that there is love, but there is no attachment, the kind of attachment one might have to one's own family or one's own near and dear ones. At least that's the way it was seen. Now, obviously, we can debate this. We can say, well, friends also, there is love between friends. And we could also say, well, family members are also like our friends. So this is not a debate about semantics, about whether this word means this or this word means that. This is just a way sometimes the words got used in these ancient texts. So they felt oftentimes more comfortable using the word Maitri than the word love, just because of this juxtaposition of the use of the word love and the actual practice, it becoming attachment. So, Maitraha, being friendly towards all. Karuna evacha. Karuna means compassionate. Compassionate in the sense of empathy, putting oneself in someone else's shoes. Because compassion can also be shown or expressed by being on a pedestal and saying, oh, I just feel great compassion for you. But the way the word karuna is used here, it's not that putting myself like, well, I am this person with all the amenities available, and you, poor person, you don't have anything, I have great compassion for you. It's not in that sense. It's in a sense of empathy, that it could as well be that I would be in your place and you could be in my place. It's just the way things are, that right now, at this stage, at this point of time, I'm here and you are there. But it could have been just the opposite. So putting myself in someone else's shoes and trying to feel what that person is feeling, that is what karuna means. That is what real compassion is. So no hatred, being friendly, being compassionate in this sense. Nirmamaha, nirahankaraha, without the feeling of I and mine. We'll see in Ramakrishna's conversations, this word I and mine comes again and again and again. Many saints and teachers in the Vedanta tradition have pointed out that the real obstacle to progress in spiritual life is just this I and mine. I is aham, mine is mama in Sanskrit. Sometimes these are thought of as the primary ego and the secondary ego. So everything that I identify as I, that becomes my primary ego. Everything that I identify as mine becomes the secondary ego. And that's really our entire world that we experience, entire things that my senses are able to grasp can either be seen as I or mine. I and mine. That's essentially how we do it. Now, while both of these are the ways the ego manifests, There is a little bit of difference between the two. And the difference is the hold that what I see as mine has over me is a little bit less than the hold that I has over me. In other words, if there is an occasion in my life when I have to choose between I or mine, and there is no third choice, then invariably I'm going to choose I. It is easier to let go of mine than to let go of I. And the most common example is, so you have just bought a new gadget. Let's say you just got a new iPhone. Just got it from an Apple store and you are walking home. And then suddenly, there's nobody much else on the street. You're just walking quickly, it's getting dark, and suddenly someone comes there and sticks a gun at your back and says, "Give me what's in your pocket, everything that you have in your pocket, or I'm going to shoot you." Now, it's kind of a very terrible scenario, but think about it. Essentially, what's the choice here? The choice is my life or this new, bright, shining iPhone that I'm carrying. So the choice really is either me, either I die, or my phone has to be given away. So it's I or mine. Now what will I choose? Yeah, it's a no-brainer. I think it'll be anyone in their right mind will say, take the phone, spare my life, let me go my way. No one's going to say, oh, this phone is so precious. I will know, then I'm never going to let go of this phone. If you want, you can shoot me. Pointless. If I don't live, then what's this phone to me? It's everything that is mine becomes significant, becomes of any value only as long as I am there. If I goes, whatever is mine is really no longer mine if I am not there. So, I, primary ego, mine, secondary ego. So sometimes when we are told in spiritual life that, oh, the ego is the hurdle, the ego must get out of the way, and that is easier said than done. There are times when we might feel, oh, I'm no one and everything is God's, I'm surrendering myself to the divine, and sometimes this might happen very naturally. But other times, most of the time really, the I sense is pretty strong. Everything that we do it with a motive. Everything that we do it with the idea that I am doing it. I want this, I like this, or I don't like this. The I is always present. So I and mine, so this I never goes away. Sri Ramakrishna said that I is like a shoot of a tree. Sometimes in these old buildings you might have seen, and there was plenty I saw when I was growing up in India. Sometimes from some crevice in a wall or something, and the external wall, some kind of a plant will start coming out. And occasionally, if you just go and chop it off, within a day or two, again something sprouts up. Unless you kind of uproot it fully, the plant will keep on coming out of that thing. The ego, Sri Ramakrishna says, is a little bit like that. We might try various ways of removing the ego, and for a time it might feel as if this ego is gone. But in an unconscious way, in a surreptitious manner, it does spring up in the life somehow. So getting rid of the ego is the ideal, but those who have attempted to do it recognize how tough it is, how difficult it is. So what should we do? One practical way to go about doing this is to try to convert as much of this I into mine. We saw in that example the mama, that which is mine, is a little bit easier to let go than that which is I. And so, if I can try to transform everything that I see as I into mine, everything that is, rather than saying that's me, I can look upon that as mine, then it might be easier to deal with it. So, the body, rather than saying this is me, I can say this body is mine. The mind, rather than saying that's me, well, nobody really says the mind is me, but when the mind is happy, I feel I am happy. When the mind is depressed, I feel I am depressed. Now, although I'm not saying I am the mind, that's exactly what I mean. So the ups and downs of the mind become my ups and downs. I'm behaving as if the mind is me. So if I can consciously live, looking upon my body, mind, intellect, everything as mine, they are instruments given to me. I'm the one who is using these instruments, but they are not me. I mean, there is still the ego, but what I'm doing as a first initial step is trying to transform everything that could come under my primary ego and making it a secondary ego. And I think that's a very good thing and very helpful thing in spiritual life. So it's not necessary, just because sometimes people rather foolishly, I think, feel, well, I'm the Atman, I'm not the body, sure, I don't have to care for the body. I'm the Atman, I'm not the mind, why should I worry about the mind? I think it doesn't, that's very reckless to think that way. Because the only instruments we have are the body and mind, there is nothing else. When we were born with the body and the mind, that's what we have. They are not me, but they are the only instruments I have if I want to succeed in life. If I want to reach my spiritual goal, I do need body and mind. And therefore, I need to take care of the body and mind. And I can take good care of my body, I can take good care of my mind by looking upon them as my instruments. They are not me, but they are my instruments. It's like my computer, my car. I'm not my computer, I'm not my car, and yet I know they are useful. Similarly, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, but they are useful. So transforming this I into mine and taking good care of my body and mind will help me progress in spiritual life. Now there is a fine line there. What does taking good care mean? And that's something that every one of us has to figure out in our own life situation. Taking care of the body, what does it mean in terms of investing my time and energy into taking care of the body? What does it mean? What does taking care of the mind mean? And how much of my energy should be invested into that? That every one of us has to figure out, because it can easily, if I'm not careful, if I'm not conscious, taking care of the body can easily become obsession with the body. Taking care of the mind can become an obsession with the mind. And every obsession is harmful. It's going to hurt me in some way. So that's the fine distinction. Taking care and being obsessed with something. And we have to figure out, and the one way that can be helpful is for a spiritual seeker to say, what is the purpose of my life? What is the goal of my life? If the goal of my life is to realize God, then so long as my body and mind become good instruments, helpful instruments in my spiritual journey, which helps me do my studies well, which helps me do my prayer, my meditation, my worship properly, which helps me go about and carry out my duties and responsibilities in life as best I can, in as selfless a manner as I can, and they are good instruments. That's wonderful. But if that balance is not kept, then either I will not care for the body and mind at all, or I will get obsessed with them. So we have to find the golden mean by which these can become helpful instruments in my life. So that is what is meant by nirmamaha nirahankaraha, free from the feeling of I and mine, even-minded in pain and pleasure, sama dukkha sukha. Sama means even, equipoise, and sukha and dukkha. So one who is able to see joy and sorrow in the same way. Now what does it mean? Even-minded. Clearly no one will think that joy and sorrow are one and the same. They are different. They feel different. We don't mind the joy, but sorrow is painful. So how do we maintain that equipoise dealing with the ups and downs of our life? There are several ways to do it. One way to do that is to recognize that they just come and go. The joy and sorrow that we experience in life on a daily basis just comes and goes. Yes, things can make us happy, but we know that no happiness lasts forever. But things can bring us pain, but we know also that the pain doesn't last forever either. And the reason for that is, if the source of my happiness, the source of my pain, if they are limited, perishable entities, then the joy or sorrow that they give me will also be limited and perishable. That's just the way things are. And at present, all of the joy and sorrow that we get in life does come from things and people who are themselves perishable, who themselves are finite, limited. They are not infinite. Now, if I can find a source that is infinite, then the joy that that infinite source will give me will also be infinite. And there is only one infinity. And that, according to the Gita, according to our scriptures, is God, is the Spirit, is the Atman or Brahman, if you want to use the kind of terminology that gets used here. So if my joy comes from God, if my joy comes out of praying to God, thinking about God, meditating on God, that joy is very different from the joy that can come to me by eating a good ice cream. Joy is joy. You cannot really distinguish between the joy, except that one joy is coming from an external object, which is perishable, and the other joy is coming not from an object, but from within. One example that we already have of a joy that does not come from an object is the kind of joy we feel when you really have good sleep. So when you have really deep sleep and you feel so fresh in the morning, not in that state of deep sleep, sushupti, there were no objects. There was nobody. In the waking state, of course, there are people, there are objects. In the dream, there are people, there are objects. But in deep sleep, there are no people, there are no objects. And yet, we feel so happy. We just feel refreshed. Now, that joy that we get in deep sleep is qualitatively very different, you could say, because it has a lasting quality to it. Now, if we could continue sleeping forever, and nobody wants to do that, that joy will be with us all the time. But of course, we know our karma will wake up in the morning, and then that joy, the sushupti sukham, the joy of sushupti will go. But we don't have to sleep all the time to get that joy. It's possible to get that joy from the self, even when we are awake. And one way of getting that joy is exactly developing the kind of qualities that are being described here. So the more I'm able to develop these qualities, that joy which is from within will manifest more and more. So that is the free from the feeling of I and mine, even-minded in pain and pleasure. Kshami, forbearing. The word that is sometimes used in Vedanta text for forbearance is called titiksha. There is a beautiful verse in the Viveka Chudamani. It goes like this. Sahanam sarva dukkhanam apratikara purvakam chinta vilapa rahitam sa titiksha nigadyate. So what is true forbearance? It's not like, oh, I'm in pain, but I'm just forbearing it. But I may not be crying out aloud, but I'm really mad inside me. I'm just hurt. I'm angry. Then that's not forbearance. A perfection in the practicing forbearance would be if I can forbear all the challenges in life, all the difficulties in life, without grumbling, without resisting, without reacting, just trying to swallow it all. If I can remain unaffected by it. There is a phrase used in the Shankaracharya's commentary on the Kathopanishad while describing the state of mind of Nachiketa. Shankaracharya says, Maharadavat akshobhyamanaha. Hrida means a big lake. And akshobhyamanaha means one who is not affected, one who there is no ripples there. So it's like a huge lake. Think about Lake Michigan, for instance. And if you go there, it just looks like a big sea. You don't see the other side of the lake at all. Now, if a group of elephants enters into that water, surely maybe just in the moment they are entering, the little bit, there's going to be a few ripples where the elephant enters. But as far as the entire lake is concerned, the lake is totally unaffected by it. It doesn't make a big deal. Even if 100 elephants enter into Lake Michigan, the lake as a whole would barely register it. But if these elephants, even just one elephant, were to enter into a small little pond, there's going to be chaos. That water is not going to be still at all. What kind of a lake or a pond my own mind is? And we can look at it in our own daily experience. Sure, all of us throughout the day pass through times when there is sometimes things to celebrate and things to grieve about. There is good news, there is bad news. How reactive are we? Do we just, if there is a good news and I just don't know how to contain my joy and I just dance about and jump about, and if there is a bad news and I just sit in a corner and start crying in the dumps, it's possible, it does happen. But a better situation would be, forbearance would be, that yes, of course, it doesn't mean that I won't be affected at all. I mean, the earlier verse said, sama dukkha sukha, same in pain and pleasure. Now, same in pain and pleasure, I mean, the wall is same in pain and pleasure. You know what to give good news to the wall and give bad news, it is same. But no, we are not walls. We have got a heart here. And so if there is a good news, it's going to make us happy. And being happy, you don't have to feel guilty about it. Being happy is wonderful. That's great. If there is some terrible news, we are going to feel sad, and that's completely natural. So, being even minded in joy and sorrow doesn't mean not reacting at all. Doesn't mean that. Of course, we are going to react. The question is, does my reaction overwhelm me? Am I still myself? And a lot of times we will find the joy or the sorrow can be so overwhelming, and my reaction to that could be so overwhelming, then I lose control over myself. Now that is, then I'm not forbearing. So forbearance really means to be able to absorb everything that happens in my life, but especially things that are challenging, that are difficult. Dukkha, sahanam sarva dukkhanam, all the dukkhas, if I can absorb it without grumbling, without grievance, without anger. That doesn't mean, again, one other clarification, that doesn't mean that I just have to just be like a doormat and all people can dump their, be a victim of injustice and exploitation and not reacting. No, of course not. I can still defend myself. I can protect myself. I can prevent injustice from happening. I can be firm. I can be strong. And I can be forbearing at the same time. So forbearing does not mean allowing to get victimized. Forbearance doesn't mean that you don't do anything about it. As I said, we have to be strong, we have to be firm, but we have to also be forbearing. What forbearance does, the quality of forbearance does, it keeps our head cool. And if it keeps our head cool, I will know what I should do. If something wrong is occurring, something unjust is occurring, I should know what I should do to remove that injustice, to remove that evil, to remove that wrong. And if I have to decide correctly, I need to be calm myself. If I am carried away by either my joy and sorrow, if I'm overwhelmed by it, then I won't be myself. And whatever decision I take in that state of mind, it's probably going to be a decision that I will regret later on. And so people who are forbearing are better decision makers. People who are forbearing are able to make good choices in life. And in spiritual life is a life of continually making right choices. Every wrong choice we make, we're taking a few steps back. Every right choice I make, I'm taking a few steps forward. And if I have to reach the destination of my journey, my life should be a succession of good, right choices. The more the wrong choices I make, I will reach the destination eventually. It's just going to get delayed because every wrong choice would mean going back in a reverse gear. And that's the importance of forbearance, to be able to absorb all the challenges and retain one's clarity so that one knows how to continue to progress towards the goal of our life. Santushtaha, ever content. Swami Vivekananda's one quote often comes to my mind whenever this quality is mentioned. He said, "By being cheerful always and smiling, it takes me nearer to God, nearer than any prayer." Spiritual life is not just about doing japa. It's not just about doing meditation. It's not just about reading the Gita. Spiritual life means being cheerful. Now, when we are happy, when everything is going well, it's easy to be cheerful. You don't need any effort for that. And no big deal. Of course, if you are happy, you're always going to have a smiling face. Now, the challenge is, even when things are not going well, can I still be cheerful? It's not going to be easy. It might seem even impossible. But even in such circumstances, if I can still manage to smile, I'm a real hero. There is something about just this smile. Now, I'm not verified this, obviously. I read it somewhere. They say that this smiling, they say that, and some of you who have studied human anatomy in a better way probably might be able to verify this. Apparently, they say like 26 some muscles and nerves or whatever in that area, they need to combine together for a smile to become possible. So, smiling is a form of exercise. Well, we need toning up of the muscles, and sometimes people do that. They lift weights, they do all kinds of things. But what about the muscles in this area? And one way of activating those muscles would be smiling. So, and smiling even when there is no particular reason. Now, a kind of a gentle smile. I mean, if they just kind of go on. In fact, there was in some cities, I think, they have what they call laughing clubs or something like that. I don't know whatever the nomenclature they have. And I had seen when I was back in India that a group of people, most of them were middle-aged and elderly, and they would go to the Marina Beach. There's a big ocean front there, and they would go there and kind of stand in a circle and just laugh aloud. That's not something that I'm recommending. I really don't know how beneficial that is. But only to the extent that people feel that just kind of letting go and laughing might give them some benefit. Whether it actually does, I don't know. And that's not really what we are discussing. It's not about just laughing for no reason at all. I'm just talking about smiling. This kind of a gentle, cheerful, maintaining that cheerfulness throughout the day will improve the quality of our prayer and meditation. If I remain cheerful throughout the day, when I sit for meditation in the evening, the quality of that meditation will be better. Because when we are not cheerful, when we are not smiling, when we always have this kind of a long face, as if the burdens of the world are upon us, again, all the nerves and muscles in this area, they are very, very tight. They are very strained. And with that kind of a tension, it's difficult to pray, difficult to meditate. An ideal position for prayer and meditation is a relaxation everywhere. And so it does help a lot. So let me read that verse 13 again. Adveshta sarvabhutanam maitrav karuna evacha nirmamo nirahankaraha samadukha sukha kshami. So we saw some of the qualities that are helpful in our spiritual life and especially in the path of devotion. Let me read those again. Person who hates no creatures and is friendly and compassionate toward all, who is free from the feeling of I and mine, even-minded in pain and pleasure, forbearing, and ever content. So today we will stop here with verse 13, and when we meet next week, we will take up verse 14. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagatgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So let's look at the questions. Is the root of hatred expectations? Expectations from other people and even things? It could be, but I suppose there could be many other reasons as well. Expectations, if our expectations are not fulfilled, then it creates sorrow, of course, and it could create anger, and it could also create hatred. Hatred, especially if people who are able to fulfill the expectations and yet refuse to do so for whatever reason, and one may start hating them. That's one situation. But surely, yes, expectations could be one possible reason why hatred emerges. Next. How can we have compassion in the heart for people who wrongfully do things for selfish reasons, for political power, and not harbor hatred in our heart for them? I think such people do deserve compassion. That doesn't mean that they should not be taken to task or punished for whatever wrong they are doing. But the compassion is because the state of the mind that they are in, the kind of distorted sense of values that their mind has, the lens through which they see the world is so distorted that that's what they do, because to them it seems like that's the only way to do things. And therefore they do deserve compassion. You just feel sorry that in such a terrible state of mind, these people are doing terrible things. And only with that sense of compassion will we be able to, in some way, be instrumental in figuring out now what should be done to help this person get out of this weird state of mind. What can I do to help this person's mind become clearer, become better? It could require punishment, it could require education, it could require any number of things. So in order to figure out what's the best way of helping this person, some amount of compassion is necessary. Because anger doesn't solve any problem. You can get angry, but that person is still going to be that person. And in my state of anger, I might try to solve the problem in some way and end up aggravating the problem. And to some extent, you could say that, although this is not neither the venue nor do we have the time to discuss the whole prison system and the present way justice is meted out, but a legitimate question can be asked that for any and every crime, if all that we can do is put people behind bars, is that solving the problem? And we could say, well, yes, it is solving some problem. It is helping the rest of the community live safe and peacefully, because all these people are now behind bars. So a part of the problem is solved. But what about the people who are behind bars? Are they getting reformed? Unless one keeps them behind bars all their life. Other than that, after a few years, they are going to be released. And when they come out, the mind with which they went inside the prison and the mind with which they came out of the prison. Has anything changed? Has that mind become better? But a lot of existing evidence shows that perhaps the mind gets worse. The experience in the prison is such that they come out bitter, angry, with even more distorted vision of the world around. And therefore they kind of get into this crime spiral and doesn't help anyone. And so getting angry may not necessarily give us the best solution to a problem. And of course, having hatred for them hurts us more than them. If I hate a person, it doesn't do any harm to that person. Hatred that harms me. So I must have compassion on myself, because I mean, even about forgiveness, people sometimes speak about, how can I forgive someone? But think about it. Not forgiving someone hurts me as much as the other person. Probably it hurts me more, because I'm carrying that anger, that resistance, and I'm the one who is hurting. And so forgiving others is first and foremost an act of compassion to oneself, because then one is freed from that. So, and clearly, I mean, there is a lot to think about on this subject, but this is one perspective on it. Next, when Sri Ramakrishna says, make the unripe ego into the ripe ego, is he saying make our primary ego into the secondary ego? No, that's not really what he's saying. When Sri Ramakrishna says about unripe I and ripe I, what he's saying is ripe I is the I that is somehow connected with God. Unripe I is the I that is connected with the body and mind. And so, while the ultimate effect may be the same, ego reduction, but the way that ego reduction is practiced is in a slightly different way. So unripe ego and ripe ego is a one way of looking at the same problem and a possible solution to it. And the primary ego and secondary ego is another way. But ultimate effect of the two will be the same. When we are in the state of joy, sometimes we get some annoying call on the cell phone, somebody trying to sell something or some disturbance, and we get very angry. How to avoid this? Well, practical call would be don't receive any calls from numbers you don't recognize. That would be the simplest way. And if that person leaves a message, you can listen to that message later on and then switch it off. I think that's probably the method that works best. Otherwise, try to be as calm as possible. Just through practice, I guess. Next, is being cheerful from the inside truly a choice? If I'm having a terrible day, how do I stay cheerful? Yes, staying cheerful is a choice, especially if I'm having a terrible day. There are several ways that come to mind. At least one way that comes to mind immediately of being cheerful is if I can step back a little from my situation and then say, God, you're having the really fun with me today. Look what a mess. You see, I'm reminded of, remember there were these Laurel Hardy movies, and I forget now who, whether it's Laurel or Hardy, and one of them, there are a lot of situations in those old movies, and one of them says to the other, look what a mess you have put me in. Some of you who have seen those movies might remember that. So a devotee could say something like that. If you're having a really terrible day and things are really not going at all the way you want them to be, someone with a sense of humor can look up, if you like to think of God as above, and say, look what a mess you have left me in, and smile. Will the smile make the day less terrible? Somewhat yes, because just in that effort to smile, you have created some space between your situation and yourself. Now, the reason people find it impossible to smile in such situation is because they are so tied up into their own situation that they cannot create any space between the two. And then it's impossible. But that's really what ego reduction is. If I can step back even from my own life situations, create a little bit of a distance and look at it and then say, it's a mess. And then say, what a mess you have put me in, and smile. That kind of creating a space in one's own life situation and looking at it objectively, in fact, is a great beginning. Because that will help me find a way of how to deal with my situation well. But if I'm not able to create that space, all that I can do is to just feel sorry for myself, or get angry, or get frustrated. So that effort to smile by creating a space opens up the possibility of me finding a way out of that jam. What is the difference in joy we experience in deep sleep from the joy of enlightenment? Isn't deep sleep also a state of ignorance which may affect the quality of the joy? Yes, of course. So deep sleep and the state of samadhi are two different things. They are not same. The only kind of similarity we can say that exists between the two is that in a state of deep sleep, the joy that it comes to us is not coming from any external object, because there is no external object. So that joy is coming from within, but because we still have the layer of ignorance over us, that joy is not unfiltered. It's still getting filtered through that ignorance. Which is why after a deep sleep, when I wake up in the morning, I say, oh, I slept so well, I did not know anything. Maybe it rained very heavily last night. Maybe there was thunder and lightning. And someone might say, last night, did you hear the sound of thunder? And I say, oh, I didn't know anything. I slept so well. I slept so deep. I didn't know anything. Now, I didn't know anything is an expression of my ignorance. Even the joy that I experienced in deep sleep was filtered through that ignorance. So it was not like the full blast of joy. Now, in the state of enlightenment, in samadhi, that layer of ignorance is not there. So that joy is not getting filtered through anything at all. And therefore, in some respects, the two are same in the sense that the joy is not coming from outside, but the joy of enlightenment is beyond compare. It's not exactly the same as the joy in deep sleep. Can you talk more about how to absorb what we feel so we can be forbearing? Yes, the practice of mindfulness does help. Mindfulness is really a practice of objectifying. What I was saying earlier about creating that space. In order for me to be mindful of something, I have to objectify it. If I am mindful of my anger, the anger becomes an object of my perception. If I become mindful of my sorrow becomes an object of my perception. And for it to become an object of my perception, a space gets created. And a space that gets created helps me retain my calmness and helps me then figure out what is the best way to deal with the situation. So yes. How can we be cheerful when dear ones are suffering? Now, cheerful doesn't. You should get the word santushta. Cheerful doesn't mean that we are kind of gloating over it. It's not like we are celebrating while others are suffering. Cheerful simply means being in a state of mind that is able to keep its own calm so that it is able to look around and understand things as they are without getting overwhelmed by them. So if I'm cheerful and if I see suffering around me, rather than that suffering coming and I'm getting absorbed in it so that I start suffering also, then I'm become incapable of helping. But if I'm able to retain my own cheerfulness, then even that state of suffering, I may be able to find a way to go and help in some way. But if I start suffering also, then I will be in need of help as much as they are, and I would become incapable of giving that help. That's the idea. Does our attachment to the transitory states of happiness and sorrow stem from our attachment to the outcome of work? How can the part of bhakti dispel the vrittis created by the elephants in life? So, yes, attachment to the outcome of work is the attachment to the state of happiness and sorrow, because all outcome of work does result in sukha or dukkha depending on whether that work is successful or not. So if things go as we planned or things are successful, it makes me happy. If they are not, it makes me unhappy. So if I'm attached to the results of my work, then I'm going to get attached to these passing joys and sorrow pass as well. So a bhakta is one who sees the presence of God in everything. A bhakta is one who sees that, think about it this way. A little baby, not too little, maybe think about it like a year old or 2 years old. Not too young, not too old either. If a mother gives something to the baby to eat or drink, so the baby knows, well, my mother is giving it to me because my mother loves me and this is good for me. And so the baby will take it. Even if sometimes the thing may not be particularly tasty. Of course, when children grow up, then they develop a mind of their own, and then a mother has to find a way of making a child take something. Sometimes a medication that is necessary, and the medication may not be so tasty, and children will not want it. And the mother then has to say, no, it's good for you, this is good. I remember when I was growing up, this bitter gourd, Karela, was something I never developed a taste for. And I'm sure this happens in many families as well. And I've heard my mother used to say, oh, take it, it's good, this purifies your blood and does this and does that, and to kind of make me take it. And so a devotee can sometimes see that, yes, I'm passing through a difficult stage in my life, but I have faith that God loves me, that whatever is happening in my life, it is somehow for my own good. Right now, I'm not able to see what this suffering and pain, what good it is doing to me. I'm not able to see it at all. But I have the faith that since everything happens through the divine will and God loves me, even this somehow I will realize later on had some positive, constructive role to play in my life. So a devotee's perspective of even difficult situations is different from someone else's. And that way of looking, that way of thinking about the challenges in one's life helps the devotee come up with different solutions to the problem, a different way of dealing with it than someone who doesn't have that way of thinking. So here is a useful, helpful comment by a physician who is a doctor. He says, physiological response of smile is relaxation and parasympathetic response instead of sympathetic overactivity. One can try to smile and see how it is impossible to have muscle intention. Yes, of course, that's very practical. Also, and this is also something very practical. If you find that you are getting irritated, or if you have problem with anger management, or if you find yourself in a situation you feel it's really making you mad and angry, then one way to deal with that is to force yourself to smile. It may look odd, that smile, it will not look natural at all, but force yourself to smile when you are about to get angry or mad. And the reason is this: it's impossible to say something nasty or bad or angry if you are smiling, because the muscles will be shaped differently in a fit of anger, and you want to scold somebody, be nasty to somebody. So if you don't want to do that, but you feel that you're on the point of doing it, then force yourself to smile. Try. Just give it a try and see whether you can be truly nasty and angry with someone in that smiling posture. Okay, I won't say anything more than that. Give it a try and see if it works. So that's your homework until next Sunday. All right. So thank you for these questions. Very interesting, very thoughtful, and there'll be lot to reflect as we go through this chapter. It's a very small chapter, but it's very, very meaningful, and there are so much food for reflection in it. So we will continue studying that next week. So, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.